Starting pitcher Charlie Morton took a no-hitter into the 7th inning. Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., Eric Hosmer, and Victor Caratini all homered for the Padres in their 6-4 win over the Reds. Starting pitcher Kyle Hendricks won his 7th start in a row in the Cubs' 2-0 victory over the Mets, and the Yankees used a 4-run 7th inning to pull away from the Blue Jays and walk away with an 8-4 win. For our latest sports news and updates, keep it tuned right here to 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Here we go.
You're in the on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. You're in the recruiting hour on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Your
Mike Schaefer and Connor Happer. Brought to you by Bubbles and
Yes,
Block.
I am.
Here are your hosts, Mike Schaefer and Connor Happer.
Welcome into the
Brought to
recruiting
you by
hour here
Bubbles
on
and
a
Block.
Friday. I am Mike Schaefer, Connor Happer, and we are on 93.7 The Ticket. Finishing out another week. Welcome into the recruiting hour here on a Friday. I am Mike Schaefer, Connor Happer. We're on 93.7 over 7.5 total.
Yeah,
Finishing out another week.
Not out of the question, though. It's the
They're at
18th
5 now, and I feel like there's going to be. I think I had set the number for the month. Show runs again on Monday. Over 7.5 total. We will see.
Yeah,
they still got a little work to do. They get you to 7.
Not out of the question, though. It's the
they're at
18th.
5 now, and I feel like there's going to be.
I was at
right
the tipping
there,
point last night, and my
potentially
James
2
Harden
more by the
my
time
James
the
Harden
show
under
runs.
bet.
Again
Oh
on
no!
Monday.
What happened?
So we will.
I
we will
hit
see.
him
They
under
get
points
you
to
to.
15 and
They
a
get you to
half.
7,
Nice.
and then you see 1. You're at the tipping point.
16.
You
I was at the tipping point last night, and my James Harden under bets.
Oh no! And it's also just the expectation of
I
once
hit him
it
under
was
points
apparent
at
they weren't
15
going to
and a
win.
half.
Nice.
And
He did.
he
What
had
put it over the top
16.
was he did one of those threes where he kicked
They
out
didn't
his
even play
legs
well.
and fell to the ground. And
Those are going to be
caught
illegal
under.
from going
Right.
forward.
Well,
And it's also
foul,
just
and
the
he made 2 out
expectation
of
of once
3
it was
at the
apparent they
line,
weren't going
and
to
I
win.
needed him
You
to
just
make 1 out
mentioned,
of 3.
which is 2 out of 3 is already kind of a
Philadelphia
win.
76. Right. That's what I thought. I think
Do you
he
see
missed the
either
second
of those
one. I'm
going
like,
to Game
holy crap,
7, or
is
do
he
you
gonna
think
miss
they
this one? I got
finish
a real chance here. Nope.
So we got 1 Game 7 already.
I want to say they
There's 2
both
Game
go to
6s
Game 7.
Nice. 3 Game 7.
Yeah, let's get
Clippers
some Game
and
7s in here.
Meanwhile, the Suns
the
are just
Jazz
sitting around
and
waiting
then
for
the
negative
Hawks
COVID
and
test for Chris Paul.
I know. The Philadelphia 7. That ended.
Do you
what,
see
Monday?
either of those going to Game
I mean,
7, or do you think
more?
they finish tonight?
Or further than that?
Their series, yeah.
I want to say they both go to Game
over the weekend.
Sunday.
They'll go an entire week.
Some Game 7s in here.
Meanwhile, the Suns are just sitting around waiting for negative COVID tests for Chris Paul. When you sweep, and then everyone else goes 7.
That ended what?
You're
Monday? And then there's so many off days in further than that in basketball.
Their series, yeah. It was over the weekend.
Well, Sunday. Here we go.
They'll go an entire week. All right.
That's crazy.
Nebraska, as mentioned, picked up another commitment. When you sweep, and then everyone else goes opening splash. You're beholden.
And then there's so many off days.
Brought to you by the Pawnee Plunge.
Just the way they do it
in Columbus.
Yeah. Well,
the best water park in the world. Nebraska, as we've talked about it many times, and that will be today's opening splash. Delayed splash.
Yeah.
Got really high by the Pawnee Plunge in Columbus. The Pawnee Plunge, the best water park where you want to be in the world. So we've talked about it many times. I can't imagine some delayed plunge. Yeah. Got really high. This is where you want to be. It is so the Pawnee Plunge. Yeah. This is where you want to be. I can't imagine something better as a kid right now. Yeah. Then it's so terrible. I can't imagine something better as a kid right now. Your popsicle is melting in your hand. Terrible outside. You might as well just go. Your popsicle is melting in your hand.
Take a plunge.
You might as well just go everything you would want for a very cool water park. Everything you would want. For go and do very cool water park experience. So go and do that because it was just one in which the kid told the local picks up a commitment paper and then it disseminated Brian Christopherson tweeted about this. You don't see that very often. Old school. You maybe see it more in basketball because it was just one in which the kid maybe told see it more in international and then it disseminated. I think from there, and you don't see that newspaper, and then it disseminated. You maybe see it more in basketball from there, or from maybe see it more in international basketball. Where I can't even be the Oleg. The last name. I don't think it's that hard. I just couldn't really remember where it started again. I just know it ends. I don't think it's that hard. I just couldn't really remember where it started. I just know it ends
under the radar.
So, but that that was one where I think he had committed in the local paper for him. But that was one where I think he had committed in the local paper for Nebraska basketball.
Put it out at like 3:30.
We're jumping on it at like Nebraska basketball scribes. We're jumping on it at like 7:38 a.m. Commits to Nebraska. Ashton Hayes, though, commits to Nebraska. I had a chance to talk to him. I think this is going to be kind of a fun. I think this is going to be kind of a fun. I don't know, Happer, if you watched the Huskers. I don't know, Happer, if you watched.
No, I actually haven't. I wanted to. I actually haven't.
This is a guy that kind of fits. This is a guy that kind of fits that. Which is to say, he's not just going to be like a Mills or a guy that you're just lining up and you're running.
No, I mean, with the size,
into the line.
No way.
You're gonna see him moved around a little bit. He thinks he can play in the slot, just that alone, let alone what he could do as a running back. He also talked about something that I thought was kind of cool. So he shows up in Nebraska. He's there last weekend. He's having his official visit. He's talking to Brian Held. They're going through all these different ways he can be used as a running back. Scott Frost shows up, and Frost basically is like, the first couple questions Frost had for me were, would I return kicks? Yeah, I will return kicks. Would I return punts? Yes, I would return punts. And then he's basically like, would you be someone that's willing to, even though you're doing all of this other stuff, would you show up on the kickoff team and go do that too? And so I think the point he was trying to make is that Nebraska just thinks his athleticism is really versatile. They'd want to use him in a variety of ways, including special teams. He thought it was really cool because he hadn't had a head coach that basically spent that much time asking like what his interest would be in terms of doing that, which he felt like was a little bit of a test to see if like he, only was interested in carrying the ball or being on offense, or if he wanted to do everything else on a football field. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He's a really bright kid. He's a good kid. We'll have him on this show, I'm sure, sometime next week. I've already kind of discussed that with him. But a nice commitment for Nebraska to pick up, which sets up a whole host of questions that we'll get into. But what were your initial thoughts, Happer, when this commitment came about?
Well,
you guys were on air.
Yeah, I thought back to the whole Justin Williams thing too, and a couple people asked at the time, like, what does this mean for that? And I at the time said I don't know if they take two. I'm not sure, but hearing you talk about it and, thinking about the versatility piece of it, maybe it is still the case that they could take another guy who is designated as a quote unquote running back. Cause he's a little bit different. 5'11", 180 pounds. I mean, not a highly rated guy. And then you just mentioned the conversation about having an emphasis on special teams, which I think is probably significant at this point. At least if we're thinking about what's next at the position. So I'm more curious because this one seems different than like, here's a running back here's your running back of the 2022 class, or here's your,
this isn't Gabe Irvin.
Here's your quarterback of the 2022 class. Like, no, it's clearly a little bit different than that.
Yeah, I think offensive athlete fits pretty well there. It's, you say not as highly rated. It's worth pointing out he's the highest rated guy in Nebraska's class.
Is he really?
Yeah. From the composite, he has the highest rating of any member of Nebraska's class. So I saw that a lot yesterday. I was like, I don't know if people have looked at the composite rankings because he sits atop. He's slightly ahead of Ernest Hausman. And then I think next would be Victor Jones Jr., and then you have Torres, and then last is Chase Androff.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Yeah. And Nebraska's class, they've got 4 guys on offense, 1 guy on defense. I think obviously you're going to see some more defensive players jump into the boat and potentially here sooner than later. But I like this addition. And then the more, you kind of talk about it.
What an interesting group so far.
Yeah. This isn't, if you were to have been like, hey, Mike, pick the first 5 guys that are going to commit into the class first, I'd have like 3 of them wrong.
Right.
Like they would have ended up somewhere else. And then I don't know, like Hausman, okay, that's one I would have probably gotten. I think Torres was one I would have probably gotten. Androff, I maybe could have, but unlikely, So it's
I don't think anybody would have got Victor Jones.
No. If Ashton Hayes and Victor Jones Jr., Ashton Hayes is only on the radar because he visited. I mean, he's someone that I knew Nebraska had offered, but I hadn't even really talked to because I didn't know what the level of interest was there. Obviously very high, comes in for a visit, goes really well. And I'll talk about his visit here a little bit. And talking to him yesterday, he basically said, Nebraska leading up to the official visit had done a series of Zooms, and he didn't know a lot about the Huskers, but when he sort of looked into it, a couple things stood out. Historically known for their weight room program, which this is a guy that, I think he wants to be a nutritionist. I think that's his, goal in life. Very, very, already at the age of 18, very knowledgeable in terms of what he's putting into his body, why he's putting it into his body. Very interested in sort of the science behind all of that. And so he basically is researching Nebraska, comes across the historic run of the weightlifting with everything with Doak Ostergaard and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then comes across Dave Ellis in nutrition, finds out Dave Ellis is still at Nebraska, learns about the whole East Stadium wing that they have for athletic performance. And before he'd ever stepped foot on campus, was blown away that this school that he kind of marginally knew about had all of these things that already aligned with his interests.
Cool.
And so that really kind of set
that's kind of how you want it ideally to happen.
Right. But it's rare that you have a kid that's that interested in those aspects of things.
Yeah.
Weightlifting, sure. The nutrition and sports performance and the science of all of it, that's a little bit different. But for him, spoke to him. He was very, very excited about that. And then certainly getting here and then getting a feel for Lincoln was a big part of it too. He's not originally from Reno. He grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania until he was 11, moved to Reno. He said, and I have never been to Erie, so I'm just taking him at his word here, said that Lincoln reminded him a lot of growing up in Erie, and that the downtown, the setup, the town size, the people, he felt like there was a lot of similarity there. I have asked people that have lived in both Lincoln and Erie.
What? You know people who...
I know one. I know a guy who spent a summer doing a journalism internship there. And so he's not sure on the direct comparison there, but hey, it worked for Ashton Hayes. It led to a commitment.
Yeah, so, whatever.
We'll learn more about Reno later in the show.
We sure will.
As this is we need a name for this, and we should get a sponsor for it somehow.
I agree.
This is something that Jake can do. I had a potential advertising person reach out to me and say that Sorensen's relentless. So there you go. He's doing his job.
That's good.
I thought that was funny. It was an unprompted text I received yesterday.
That's good news, I guess, for us.
So Ashton Hayes, again, his visit, he also really liked. He got to spend a lot of time with Cam Taylor-Britt and with Alante Brown. Those were two guys that I think, were essentially player hosts or guys that he was hanging out with a lot. And I think it's remarkable how involved someone like Cam Taylor-Britt is in Nebraska's recruiting aspect. When there's a chance, these two guys are never on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just Ashton Hayes. I mean, it was the first weekend in which Cam Taylor-Britt's going up and introducing himself to all of these recruits. And we've gotten to know him over these 3 years. And by know him, I mean, you see glimpses. It's not like we know him intimately or anything, but
good idea.
He's clearly someone who cares a lot about this program, both in its immediacy and its long-term future. And I think he's just kind of a unique guy in that regard. And obviously we've seen upperclassmen be involved in recruiting before, but I just think that there's something a little bit different in how much it means to them when these guys are here. And I think that's really unique. But so Ashton's talking about hanging out with those guys, and they basically hit downtown Lincoln. They're walking around the rail yard, and he was just blown away by the celebrity nature of being a Nebraska football player, that everyone more or less knew who they were. And he just I'm walking with him, how can I not, this is everything I want. And so he knew on the visit he was going to commit to Nebraska. And so for him, it was just a matter of, I got to make sure this isn't a visit high. He told the staff he wanted to commit. Scott Frost said, let's take a couple of days, make sure that this is exactly what you want to do. We'll talk to you middle of next week. And if it's still what you want, okay, we'll do it. And that's how it played out. And so he went back to Reno, talked to his coach, talked to his family, and basically talked to Nebraska yesterday, and they were ready to go.
Nice.
So that's kind of how it came about. And you mentioned Justin Williams. And this is sort of how I think I would separate it if you're a Nebraska fan right now and you really want Justin Williams. I don't think they're out of it by any means for him. I think they would take both of these guys. I think if you're Nebraska, to protect yourself, you've got Justin Williams who's visiting Louisville this weekend. He had a great visit to West Virginia. It suddenly seems like his timeline has moved up a little bit from when we talked to him on this show, and he talked about the end of November. It now seems like maybe there could be a summer decision because some of the other schools that he liked and had thought about seeing in the fall have taken running back commitments this month. And so I don't know for sure that he's going to make a decision. But if you're Nebraska, you don't want to get left out entirely. And you don't want to hold off a kid. If Ashton Hayes feels like you're not as interested in him as he is in you, then that's going to be a tough thing for him to overcome. You go ahead and you take this commitment because they're not the same player. I mean, I think Justin Williams is more your traditional running back like a Gabe Ervin. And I think Ashton Hayes, you're going to derive a lot more value in a variety of ways. There's room for both of that on your team, certainly. And I think there's room in the numbers in your class that you can make it work. Now, could it end up where Ashton Hayes is the only running back in the class? Sure. But it wouldn't be at the behest of, or it wouldn't cause Justin Williams to not be an option, is what I'm saying. And so I know that was a big topic of conversation. We're seeing that with Landon Sampson and Grant Page as well. And I'm going to put in a crystal ball for Grant Page. And I think that Nebraska is going to come away with that commitment, but it doesn't mean that they won't also continue to work after Landon Sampson. I think that the situation in which it was one or the other in May have changed a little bit for Nebraska. They know a little more of what they have on campus, what their numbers are going to be, who they might expect to come back, and they might be more willing. And especially if they really like both of them, I think you just sort of make it work, especially in a year where
I would say so too, but it felt like they
initially it felt like it was one or the other.
We're pretty convinced that on the numbers piece of it. That's what I've been saying from the beginning. Like, I don't know. You kind of take, to a certain extent, you're not going to take a full boat, I guess, 25 or whatever this year, but you could figure out the numbers later. There's always going to be attrition. You know that. You just can't plan on how much, but I don't think that should scare you on taking a kid that you really like this time around. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I just think that there's probably numbers to be found in the class elsewhere. I mean, I think you're probably taking a small group of offensive linemen, so you might be taking only 2 there. You might only be taking 2 defensive linemen. And your linebacker, you may just take 1 inside linebacker, which you already have in Ernest Hausman. You get Jake Applegate, and he lines up as an outside linebacker for you. Then you take 1 more guy. You can kind of see how these numbers can be finessed a little bit. But I just think if you're Nebraska, you don't know for sure what's going to happen with Ohio State and Landon Sampson. You're not going to shut the door on Grant Page. If you're Nebraska and you don't know what's going to happen with Justin Williams, you're not going to shut the door on Ashton Hayes. And so because of that, it gives you the opportunity to go ahead and grab those guys now, see how it plays out. It's different than MJ Morris and Richard Torres, where it's like MJ Morris seemed like he wanted in. Nebraska knew that they were in a really good spot with Richard Torres. Mm-hmm. I don't know that they feel the exact same way about Landon Sampson and Justin Williams, and they might end up with all of them. And that would be the ideal scenario.
Gotcha.
But we just have to kind of see how it all unfurls, I suppose. But so far, Nebraska adds another commitment, and it looks pretty good for the Huskers. In addition to Ashton Hayes, I found this out last night. Ashton Hayes' coach is Jim Snelling. Jim Snelling's son is Robbie Snelling. Robbie Snelling is a 4-star outside linebacker from Reno, Nevada, McQueen High School. Not Steve McQueen High School, disappointingly. That was probably the biggest, saddest takeaway from last night. I was really hoping it was Steve McQueen High School, and it was not.
No. There are a couple notable people from Reno, Nevada, which we will talk about later in the show.
Very nice. Well, one of those notable people, as it matters to Nebraska right now, Robbie Snelling, outside linebacker, 4-star, just outside of the top 247. He's taking visits to Arizona and Oregon. I think he's got a visit to Washington State by the end of the month. He is coming out, or plans to come out, to Nebraska for a game this fall, a potential official visit there. And Ashton said that he would love to tag along when Robbie does that because he wants to see a game. So there could be a double dip at McQueen High School in Reno, Nevada, an area where I don't think Nebraska's recruited a ton, but suddenly you got one, maybe you could end up with two. And so that's something to keep an eye on as well, as Nebraska kind of pulls this whole thing together. But it was a unique commitment last night, and it'll be fun to kind of see where that all goes, what it all means for the Huskers moving forward.
For sure.
All right, we're going to go ahead and go to break now, and we're going to bring in Brandon Huffman from 24/7 Sports. He'll talk to us about Ashton Hayes. We'll learn about Robbie Snelling. We'll see what else is happening for Nebraska in the Pacific Northwest. All that and more here on the Recruiting Hour.
You're listening to the Recruiting Hour with Mike Schaefer and Connor Happer on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Did you know Myers Cork and Bottle offers complete beverage catering and bartending services for everything from tailgates to weddings? Learn more at MyersWine.com or by calling the shop at 476-1518. And don't miss Thirsty Thursday with Kevin Meyer, Thursdays at 4:30 on The Drive.
Hi, Sean Callahan here for Koppel Chevrolet GMC, and there has never been a better time to trade in your car, truck, or van, and Koppel wants to be the place to do it. We have sold and serviced vehicles here in Louisville for over 45 years, and to show our appreciation, Bob would like to invite you down to the dealership to get a multi-point inspection, oil change, alignment check, and Kelly Blue Book evaluation for your vehicle at no charge. Yes, you heard right, no charge. This is a limited time offer. Go online at koppelcars.com, schedule your visit. You must have an online appointment to qualify. Offer ends June 30th.
In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, volunteers across Nebraska have banded together to help our communities weather the storm. Let's take a day to honor their outstanding service through the Step Forward Awards. If you know someone who's made a difference in this difficult time, nominate them for the Disaster Volunteer Award. Go to serve.nebraska.gov and click Nominate Now. That's serve.nebraska.gov and click Nominate Now. Sponsored by Serve Nebraska, aired by the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Mike Schaefer here with five-star child care provider Lee Beecher from Bubbles and Blocks. Let's start with what makes Bubbles and Blocks special.
We have 3 beautiful locations in Lincoln that provide the safety, security, and reliability you need while also bringing a family feel to each classroom at every location.
I also hear some congratulations are in order.
Thank you. Yes, we just won the Lincoln Choice Award for Best Daycare and Preschool for the 3rd year in a row.
What should people do if they want to join the Bubbles and Blocks family?
Call to set up a tour to enroll your child today, or you can visit bubblesandblocks.com to apply to join our team.
Tractor Supply Distribution Center in Waverly is now hiring for all shifts. They're a 24/7 facility and a clean environment to work in. There's potential to earn up to $25.25 per hour with opportunities for overtime. They also offer a retention bonus as new team members are eligible for a bonus as high as $1,000. Come be a part of the Tractor Supply team. Apply today at www.tractorsupply.jobs.
Summertime is here and the temperature is rising. Beat the heat at the Pawnee Plunge Water Park in Columbus all summer long. Pawnee Plunge features a full day of fun for the whole family, including the Flow Ride, the only one in Nebraska, a large swimming pool, diving boards, a lazy river, climbing wall, and of course, massive water slides. It's a great place for parties or a great spot to lounge around all day long. Book your party by calling 402-562-4269. Come splash and play the Pawnee Plunge Way in Columbus from May 31st through August 8th.
This Father's Day weekend, make plans to stop by the Testicle Festival at Round the Bend Steakhouse. They'll have 2 beer gardens with ice-cold beer, hot nuts, Rocky Mountain oysters, beef fries, bull testicles, and if you can't handle that, there's burgers, corn dogs, and nachos. Live DJ from 2 p.m. to midnight and live entertainment 4 p.m. to midnight. $10 cover charge, but free for military personnel. It's the Midwest's best field party, the Testicle Festival at Round the Bend Steakhouse, starting at 11 a.m. on Saturday, June 19th. You can't cancel D's nuts.
Hey, Nebraska, Grant Wistrom here to remind you to stay in the game. Seatbelts have been proven to be one of the best ways to save your life in a crash, yet many Nebraskans still don't buckle up. Worse yet, not wearing a seatbelt is a habit that will pass on to our impressionable youth, who will then think it's safe to not buckle up. Whether you're traveling near or far, it's always important to buckle up. Car crashes can happen anytime, anywhere, to anyone. Your best defense is your seatbelt. We need everyone to buckle up every time. We need you to stay in the game.
One unforgettable event. One chance to get up close and personal with some of the greatest names in golf. One opportunity to create memories that will last a lifetime. Get your tickets now for the U.S. Senior Open, coming to Omaha July 5th through the 11th at the Omaha Country Club. If you're looking for family fun for all ages, this is one championship you don't want to miss. For tickets, visit ussenioropen.com.
Back to the Recruiting Hour with Mike Schaefer and Connor Haffer, presented by Bubbles and Blocks on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Welcome back to the Recruiting Hour. Mike Schaefer, Connor Haffer here, and we're excited to bring in, for the first time in a while, all the way up in the Pacific Northwest, Brandon Huffman from 24/7 Sports. Brandon, how you doing?
Oh, living the dream.
How busy have you been in the month of June now that you've got all these kids in the area that are starting to be able to take visits, and of course, the camps and combines for you they stopped briefly, but they have at least been up and running. But it just feels like this has to be the busiest month you've experienced in more than a year.
Yeah, just the last week alone, I flew down to Florida for the Under Armour Future 50, flew back home, got home late Sunday night, and Tuesday morning I was on a 6 a.m. flight down to Sacramento for the 2-day Sacramento State mega camp with about 40 college staffs. I got a camp this weekend. I got 3 camps next week, the opening and Elite 11 at the end of the month. I am really looking forward to the dead period coming back. I know we all were chomping at the bit to get the dead period over with, and now that it's gone, we kind of enjoyed that little quiet and peace that we had for a little while.
Yeah, I hear you there. I definitely hear you there. Have you ever forgotten what state you're in with all the travel that you do?
I have. There's actually been times where I'm like, am I in Oregon? Am I in California? Am I in Washington? I forget what airport I'm flying to or I'm flying out of, where I'm taking the rental car. And in fact, yesterday, I was trying to fly out of Sacramento, and for some reason in my mind, I was flying out of the Oakland airport. So I had originally put into the GPS Oakland airport, and it was about 10 minutes into my drive where I realized, wait, no, I'm not going to Oakland. I'm going to Sacramento.
Man, that would have been bad. You show up at the airport and there's no flight for you.
Exactly.
That's not gonna do you any favors there. All right. So Nebraska picked up commitment yesterday, a relatively surprising one, though he did visit the weekend before. Surprising that I don't know if Nebraska fans knew how high on the board he was for the Huskers. Ashton Hayes, running back wide receiver out of McQueen High School in Nevada. What do you know about Ashton? I'm pretty sure you've seen him at a camp or two. What can you just kind of tell us about him in general?
Yeah, I've actually seen him at a couple camps, one of those being in his backyard in Reno last summer. Went out to the Best Coast Showcase in August to go see him. There had been a lot of buzz about him. He had gotten a few offers, 2 Pac-12 offers. I think he was fresh off getting a Stanford offer probably about a week before I had seen him. And you could see why. He's I know the lazy comp would be to compare him to Christian McCaffrey. I would say he's more like Max Borghi out of Washington State, where he's a good receiver. I think he's a better receiver than he is a true running back. And that's more of a compliment to his ability to catch the ball, his ability to make people miss in space when he gets out into the open field. Then I saw him again in the fall at the National Preps Combine, and one of the fastest guys there. So he's got a lot of electricity to him. He's got some wiggle. He had played at Damani Ranch in Reno early in his career, then transferred over to McQueen, where he's playing with Robbie Snelling. His father, Robbie's dad, Jim, is the head coach there. It's been a while since McQueen's had a elite guy. You got to go back to Kyle Van Noy, and they got 2 of them. And, Ashton's a little bit quieter. He's got less of a social media footprint. And so I think, in this day and age, if you don't have as much of an active social media footprint, then you're kind of out of sight, out of mind. But, make no mistake, he's a talented player. It's a loaded year in the state of Nevada. In some years, he'd be ranked as high as the top 2 or 3 guy in the state, but it just shows you the talent in the state of Nevada this year.
So when you have a guy like Ashton, how difficult is he to sort of put a position on? Because like you kind of said, he's maybe a little bit better at catching the ball than he is at running it. Some schools are going to see him as a running back. Some are going to see him as a wide receiver. You could just slap athlete on there. But from an evaluation standpoint, is it relatively difficult when you have a guy like that you just can't really slide into one spot or the other?
Well, if people are checking out 24/7, they'll notice real recently that we took away the all-purpose back label and put it all in as a running back. And so he was the guy up until that merger of the positions was listed as an all-purpose back, because I think that was a better way of describing him, because he is going to be a back. He's not a guy that's going to be a true slot receiver. He's not a true receiver. I mean, even the athlete designation is almost more, he's a two-way guy rather than being, a three different position on offense type of guy. So I think all-purpose back kind of fit him because he can be used in a variety of ways. You can use him as a between the tackles type of back. You can use him in fly sweeps and end arounds and, put him on wheel routes and just find ways to get the ball in his hand. So he's one of those very unique players in that I don't think even his designation as a running back truly tells you what kind of player and what kind of versatility he brings.
Several of these guys from Nebraska's staff from your time out there in the Pacific Northwest. And of course, Scott Frost is the offensive coordinator at Oregon and the offense that they kind of want to run. Why is this such a good fit for the Huskers?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to the positional versatility and the way that they can use him. And because he can be used in a myriad of ways, I think that's something that, you don't see. I think in the specialization over the last couple of years with 7-on-7, you have guys that they're just straight up receivers. You have guys that are just straight up tight ends. You have guys that are straight up running backs. But you have less and less guys where a few years ago, a guy of his ability, a guy of his size, likely says, I'm going to make that transition to be a full-time slot receiver, or I'm still a running back. All-purpose backs seemingly are becoming forgotten a little bit more. And so I think what he does is he brings that dimension to Nebraska, to what Scott Frost wants to do. You look back at the teams that, Scott Frost was the OC for at Oregon. The way they were able to use a guy like a DeAnthony Thomas in space, the way they were able to use, guys like Kenyon Barner, where it wasn't just, you had your LeGarrette Blount, you had your LaMichael James, you had those power backs that Oregon had, but when Frost took over the offense, you started to see they have guys that maybe aren't traditional, true between the tackle, 25, 38 carry a game back, but if you use them wisely and you use them versatily, you're going to be able to exploit defensive mismatches. And I think that that's what Hayes fits, is that he goes back to, being a guy who's kind of a jack of all trades. And I know there's always that stigma. You're a jack of all trades, master of none. But again, I don't think that fairly tells the tale. I just think he's got the ability to do kind of whatever he's asked. And I think that that's what Scott Frost is going to use him as a guy that can, make people miss, whether that's between the tackles, whether it's out in space, whether it's in the open field, however it may be. I think Ashton Hayes brings that dimension.
Talking to Brandon Huffman here at 24/7 Sports, covers the Pacific Northwest out there, and talking about Ashton Hayes and everything else going on for the Huskers out there. One of the takeaways I had from talking with Ashton is that Nebraska is also pretty hard after Robbie Snelling as well, and that the interest at least seems to be somewhat mutual. There's some talk of him coming out for a game in the fall to see Nebraska, and Ashton would tag along for it. What do you know about Robbie Snelling? Because the big takeaway I had from him when he came on Nebraska's radar, he was a Stanford baseball commitment at one time. This is a two-way guy. I think he's no longer committed to Stanford, and his future may be exclusively football. But what can you tell us about Robbie?
Well, and that's the thing. I'm not entirely convinced that his future is going to be exclusively football, because the reality is he's still thrown into the 90s. If you saw what his perfect game numbers were last year, I guess baseball is all about exit velocity and all this other mumbo jumbo that it didn't exist 20 years ago. But whatever his numbers were, they were impressive, because the perfect game Twitter was highlighting what those numbers were. So when you're hitting into the 90s and you're a pitcher, you can hit like he can, there's still that potential. And obviously Nebraska has dealt with having a highly rated recruit come in and then never show up on campus because of baseball. And I think with Robbie being such an elite baseball player, that's always going to be a concern no matter where he signs. But I also think there is a true, genuine desire on his hand to play football at the next level, but baseball is going to have to be just as much of a part of the package. So I think Nebraska, if they can get him on the campus and really emphasize and hammer home the ability for him to play two sports. I know when he went to Oregon on his official visit, he wasn't able to go watch Oregon play. They were hosting the regionals, but he did a photo shoot in an Oregon baseball uniform. Last weekend when he went to Arizona, couldn't go watch and visit too much with them because they were hosting the Super Regionals, but did a photo shoot with the baseball uniform. So baseball is going to be a factor in his decision. Right now, I think Oregon's in a really good spot for him, but they also got the first visit. So there's a lot of first visit, post-visit glow. He was planning to visit Texas this month. Now that looks like it's going to go into the fall. Stanford's out of the picture entirely. So if you're a school recruiting against Stanford, they're not a threat anymore. Even though he was committed for baseball and had a football offer, he's not considering there. UCLA is also potential for him. John Savage, the head baseball coach at UCLA, is a former Nevada guy. His father-in-law was the longtime legendary Nevada football coach, Chris Ault. So, UCLA is a potential, but I wouldn't be surprised if now that Ashton's there, with Robbie still planning to kind of play things by ear, see how this summer baseball goes for him, Nebraska could get a visit from him, and then they just need to hammer home, hey, you can play football in the fall, baseball in the spring. That's how you're going to have to sell Robbie Snelling to get him to come to your school.
From a football perspective, he's 6'3", 200 is what we have on the profile at 24/7 Sports. Is he a guy that you think could handle an outside linebacker spot in a 3-4? Because that's sort of where he would slot for Nebraska. They have a lot of inside linebackers, so it's just trying to line up where the position might fit. Do you see outside for him?
I do. I think he's a fluid athlete. I think he's a guy who can play in space. He's a guy that, he's got the strength, and if you need him to get after the quarterback, he can do that too. But he's an elite athlete. I think that, baseball players get a bad rap for not always being the most athletic players, but we're not talking about Bartolo Colon here. We're talking about a